almost there.
Okay.
Okay, I believe we're ready to go.
Randy,
Everyone.
Randy, can you just make sure there's no one sitting in the waiting room who should be here, because I see that Sousa had logged. Sousa had logged on the first time, and now I don't see her. I just want to make sure we're not missing anyone who should be.
Right. I only
Okay.
have I have only one attendee in the waiting room, and they are the public speaker that registered. Almost there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we're ready.
We're ready to go. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here at the Ventura County Animal Services Commission, November 18th. We've just slightly delayed for a technical reason, but here we are ready to go. So I think we have a roll call.
Carmen Ramirez,
I'm here.
Sousa Francina, Susan Santangelo, Diane McCall,
I'm here.
Chris Senegren,
Present.
John Zaragoza,
Present.
Stephen Gama, Dee Dee Kavanaugh,
Here.
Jeanette Sanchez Palacios.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. The next item is a Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Commission Member Sanchez Palacios to lead us. Are you able to
Sure.
do that, Jeanette?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to a review of the agenda and ask if anyone would like to discuss any item, to reorder it, or anything like that. Oh, Sousa, did you have your hand up? Sousa. Can't hear you. If you're speaking, I can't hear you. Sousa, do you hear me? No? Well, you have your hand up, so I'm assuming you want to say something about the agenda, but don't hear you. Can anyone else hear Sousa?
No.
Commission Member Francina? All right, well, I think we have to proceed unless you want to put in the chat so I could hear what you want us to do. Sousa says, I'm having trouble accessing the meeting, but we do see you. We do see you. Maybe you could put that in, Randy. Okay, so you are visible on camera, Sousa. Do you hear me? Okay, well, we have to proceed. We've got a time situation. Keep working on getting back in. Maybe you can reboot. Sousa? Any suggestions, Randy?
I would suggest that she leave the meeting and return. Looks
Yeah.
like she may have the same issue though, unfortunately.
Yeah, redo. Okay, well, let's go ahead then with the consent calendar. And let's see, does anyone have any issue or want to discuss any of the matters on the consent calendar? I see no one raising hand or raising issues, so can we have a motion on that, please?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, I didn't catch who it was, but perhaps you could say who moved?
Diane McCall.
Diane, and I think Susan seconded, correct? Wrong?
Dee Dee did.
Didi, okay, wasn't looking. All right, let's have a roll call on the consent agenda.
Carmen Ramirez,
I'm here. I mean, yes.
Sousa Francina, Susan Santangelo,
Yes.
Diane McCall,
Yes.
Chris Senegren,
Yes.
John Zaragoza,
Yes.
Steve Goma, Dee Dee Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Jeanette Sanchez Palacios.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So the next item is presentations, proclamations, and commendations. Do we have any, Director Rose?
We don't.
Okay, I'll just point of privilege, thank everybody for working through this difficult time remotely and on scene, and really appreciate the work. We can't say that enough, how difficult it's been for everybody in every place, and taking care of the animals that people have so much affection for and concern. Really very important work. Thank you. This is the time for public comments. This is when we do public comments at item 7 on the agenda. Do we have any public speakers?
Good morning, Chair Ramirez. Members of the public, if you would like to be added to the public comment queue for non-agenda items, please connect now to Zoom. If you are not already connected and wish to make a public comment, please visit www.vcas.us/VCAS-commission and complete the registration form by clicking on the blue registration button. You will receive a Zoom login credentials for this Zoom meeting. If you are calling in using a phone number provided in the Zoom credentials, press *9 to be added to the speaker queue, and you will then press *6 on your telephone keypad to unmute yourself. Our first speaker today will be Susan Santamaria. I'm going to let her in right now. Susan, I'm sorry, Ms. Santamaria, are you available? Can you hear?
Yes. Yes, I can. I came here.
You have 3 minutes to deliver your public comment, and your time begins now.
Okay. I came here today. We need to speak about the staffing issues. They are severely understaffed, and we'd like to know why temporary staffing was not brought back in to help with the situation at hand. Right now, you have very, very few staff taking care of the animals. They have become very short-tempered. I can't blame them. The work is phenomenal. I helped them out one day in the kennels, and I was ready for a nap after doing just one side. And a lot of them are doing this for 3-4 hours at a time. They're not getting to know the animals like they used to. And we'd really like to see temps brought in immediately and not let go this time if they're good temps, and until we get this situation resolved. The other situation at hand is if any staff member is involved with a traumatic event with one of the animals, which has happened. I was witness to one. I think it would be very proactive, and police departments do it, fire departments do it, our military does it, is to make sure this person's mental health is in just as great a shape as their physical health. And I think they need to see a therapist, and because PTSD is very real, and it can happen to anyone at any time. But I think these traumatic events takes its toll on these staff members, whether they're physically okay, but mentally they cannot be physically okay. And I don't think they should be involved in any decision-making regarding life and death situations of an animal with a bite history until they are cleared by a therapist. And it's only taking on for their own mental health, because everyone suffers. And right now, these animals are suffering. All the beds were removed. They were just thrown away. We don't know why. We were told because they were old, but not all of those beds could be old. And we're looking to give these dogs some comfort. And our older guys really need those beds. And a lot of them don't have them. So if you can imagine being in the cold night, in a wet situation, on a cold bed, and you have arthritis. It's horrible. It's horrible to even think about. But it happens. And we're just trying to avoid it as volunteers. We're trying to make these animals as comfortable as possible. And I
Ms. Santamaria,
understand.
your
because of
time
this-
has elapsed.
Thank you, Ms.
sorry.
Santa Maria. Appreciate that. Do we have any other public speakers?
We do not.
All right, so let's go on to the business item. Item A, receive a presentation of the Brown Act. And we do have Attorney Jeff Barnes from the County Counsel's Office. And this is a bit overdue, but I think we could always use an update. Thank you, Mr. Barnes, for being here.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Ramirez and members of the commission. Good morning, everyone. Jeff Barnes, Chief Assistant County Counsel with the Ventura County Counsel's Office. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I advise county departments and agencies on ethics, conflict of interest, and Brown Act issues, among other things. I realize that I believe all of you are already public officials, have presumably already undergone Brown Act training before. And so this is intended to be a brief refresher. And so I'll move through the PowerPoint relatively quickly. Please feel free to interrupt me with questions. If you want to talk through anything, I would encourage that. Interactive is always better. But without further ado, I'll begin, and let's see if, Randy, are you going to handle the slides? Okay, cool. Can you go to the next slide, please? And actually, one more. And so starting with the purpose of the Brown Act, just like any law, it's good to know the intent of it, to understand, why it's there and why the rules exist. The purpose of the Brown Act is to ensure that almost all aspects of the public decision-making process are conducted in public and open to public scrutiny. Next slide. And so the key principles are that the work of your commission, just like any other city or county agency or department or commission or board, the work you do is a public's business, and only the public can only trust and basically buy into a process that it can see and that it can participate in. So that's the best way to have effective government, especially in these divisive times when there is so much misinformation and I'll just leave it at that. But to the extent the public can participate, that just increases confidence in the process. So that's what the Brown Act's all about. So it's especially important right now, in my opinion. Next slide. And so the Brown Act has multiple transparency rules, which require public agencies to, or I should say legislative bodies, to conduct business in open and publicized meetings and to allow the public to participate in the meetings. Next slide, please. And so, what boards and commissions and agencies of the Brown Act apply to? It applies to what are called legislative bodies. And so that obviously is the governing body of an agency, such as the County Board of Supervisors or city councils. But it also, as we know, because it applies to your commission, it applies to subordinate boards or commissions that are created by formal action of the governing bodies. And so it does apply to your commission. And so just one other thing to keep in mind, and I'm not sure how often this comes up, if at all, with your commission, but if your commission does create standing committees with either a set meeting schedule or continuing subject matter jurisdiction, then the Brown Act would apply to those standing committees as well. And that's in contrast to what are often referred to as ad hoc committees that are just established to look at one issue and have a limited time frame and report back after a short period of time. The Brown Act would not apply to those types of ad hoc committees. Next slide, please. And so the Brown Act specifically states that all meetings of the legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend. And so that's the general rule. Again, it's all about transparency and public participation. Next slide. And then that raises a question, well, what is a meeting under the Brown Act? And as I'm sure you have all heard before, the definition of meeting is broader than what one might expect. The formal definition is any congregation of a majority of members at the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action upon any matter under their jurisdiction. And so that's a lot broader than having a meeting be just, what's agendized and scheduled and what we're all participating in today. A meeting can occur at any time and any place when a majority of your commission gets together to discuss the commission's business, whether it be a formal or informal setting. And so that's the important takeaway to keep in mind here. And no action needs to be taken for there to be a quote unquote meeting under the Brown Act. Conversations or deliberations about the subject matter of your commission would or could create a Brown Act meeting. And so this includes any workshops or study sessions or retreats at which a majority of your commission is present. So just be cognizant of that and keep that in mind. Next slide. And so when is a meeting not a meeting and thus not a violation of the Brown Act and we'll get into the agenda rules and notice rules that apply to quote unquote meetings. And basically there's kind of two flavors here. One is individual contacts between members of legislative bodies, including your commission, do not constitute a Brown Act meeting. A meeting occurs when there's contacts about this, subject matter of your commission, and those conversations or contacts basically pull in a majority of your commission. That's when a meeting occurs. And so if two of you are discussing subject matter, that's fine. But as I'll get into later, you just need to be careful about what's called a serial meeting when those conversations are then conveyed to other members, and then you're pushing up against the majority. But individual contacts are fine. And so then, the rest of this PowerPoint basically identifies situations where a majority of your commission, and again, I realize they're all public officials, I'm sure there's instances when all of you have been in the same room at the same time, whether it be community meetings or conferences or seminars or social or ceremonial occasions. That just happens and that's fine. The main thing to keep in mind there is that you need to be careful about discussing commission business with the other members at those occasions. And again, individual contacts would be fine, but if it's a meet and greet and you are walking around the room and you have a conversation about commission business with more than a majority, then that technically could be a Brown Act meeting. So that's sure you've heard that before, but that's where you need to be careful. But just the fact that you're all in the same room at the same time is not a meeting. Okay, next slide, please. So here's just a few other examples of when majority all being in the same place at the same time is not a meeting. If you do have if a standing committee of your commission has a meeting, and other individual commission members can attend, as long as they don't participate, that's fine. And also if, again, these are situations where a majority of you could be at another public legislative body's meeting in the same place at the same time, but as long as you're not talking about commission business, that's all fine. Next slide, please. So again, I'm sure this is just a refresher for you, and I alluded to it before, but the most common situations where the Brown Act meetings do occur, and it's almost always inadvertently, is when there's what's called a serial meeting. And serial meetings are expressly prohibited by the Brown Act. And so the serial meeting is a series of communications, and this is the important thing to keep in mind, either direct or indirect, each of which involves less than a quorum of the legislative body, so members of your commission, but when taken as a whole, involves a majority of the members. And so the communications would need to involve discussion, deliberation, or even taking poll votes or action on an issue within the subject matter of your jurisdiction. And another really important thing to keep in mind, and this kind of relates to the indirect communications, is that serial meetings can occur through personal intermediaries. The most common situation, though, is through emails these days, or text messages, I guess, phone calls, letters, written proposals, or any other form of communication. And so basically when a serial meeting's triggered when there's a communication that makes it to a majority of your commission that's basically talking about or deliberating about any matter within your commission's subject matter jurisdiction. So you just need to be really careful about that. And the reasoning behind this is that, again, the whole purpose of the Brown Act is to require those types of deliberations in general, if they're going to involve a majority of your commission, to have those deliberations and actions occur in public, and so the public can see what your commission is thinking and talking about, and what's on your minds, and so the public has a chance to participate, as opposed to having those communications and deliberations occur behind closed doors or on the internet or email system. Next slide, please. And so there's getting into the weeds on serial meetings. There's kind of two different types. One is called the hub and spoke, and that's kind of the indirect communications where, let's say it's basically where you're communicating through an intermediary, whether that be a staff member, even a member of the public, or another member of your commission, where, let's say one of you says, oh, well, we have this issue at the animal shelter. I think we need to do something about it. Here's what I'm thinking. And so that basically that hub individual who one of you speak to then conveys your thoughts to another member, or I should say, yeah, 3 other members or 4 other members, such that your communication and your thoughts are relayed to a majority. That's when you would have a serial meeting, because again, it's indirect deliberation or communication about something that should occur in public. So that's the thought there. The other, like I said before, these days, the most common Brown Act scenario I've seen we need to be careful about is the email chain, where let's say two of you commissioners have an email communication about an item. Super easy to forward that to another member, maybe a couple other members. So then you have a chain going with each of you kind of putting your thoughts down about an issue. Once that hits a majority of your inboxes, then that's when you have a serial meeting. So very kind of scary, easy to happen these days. So be careful about that. All that being said, I do want to emphasize individual briefings between your commission and especially staff members to gather information that you need. It's absolutely fine, and it happens all the time, and it's good government. But what you should keep in mind there is that ideally the information flows one way from staff to your commissioners, so you have the information you need to deliberate at the appropriate time. And so please try not to give your thoughts to staff. I mean, you can give some guidance and direction, and staff also needs to know if that does occur, if you're getting feedback, because I know it happens, that feedback should not be shared with other commissioners, because that could inadvertently create a serial meeting. Anyways, next slide, please. So let's see, I'm getting a chat. Now it disappeared. I'll keep going through. I do have, I think the question was, are there best practices? And here we go. So Brown Act and email. So tips for avoiding problems. Your commission should refrain from replying to an email that's directed to a majority of the members concerning a public discussion or deliberation. The reason being that if one of your commissioners does reply with your substantive thoughts on an issue and it goes to all of the members, then that right there could be construed as a serial meeting. And so, yeah, you should never reply all. And the second point is you should be careful about taking a firm position or making a commitment on public matters that are yet to be decided. And that's again, and I know it happens, and you have strong feelings, but the risk there and the kind of the risk management is if you do that, if you have individual communications between two of you, you need to be sure you're on the same page, that you're not going to, neither of you is going to discuss it with more commission members, because that's a risk, right? As I talked about before. So you just need to be careful about that. And like I said, the same goes, and this is kind of for staff, if commissioners do share their thoughts or the position they intend to take on an item with staff, then staff should not convey that to the other commissioners for the same reason. And again, the emails are so dangerous because they can even be forwarded without your knowledge. You can be well-intentioned to communicate just with one other commissioner about an item. You think you're on the same page, but then lo and behold, that email is forwarded to a majority of you. That's why email is so dangerous, and you need to be really careful about that. And then another best practice really is the bullet point says, the last major bullet point says only email the entire commission to provide information. Actually, better yet, the best practice there is not to email the entire commission at all. If you have information that you want to share or materials you want to share with other commission members, the best practice there is to provide that information to staff and have staff distribute to the other commissioners, ideally in a public meeting setting, so the public is privy to the same information and has access to the same materials. Again, the reason being is that so the public knows what your commission's considering and what information you have, and so the the public is able to fully participate. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. You already alluded to this. When you're replying to an email, you don't know where the email is going to end up. And this is almost kind of going to the Public Records Act now, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And that's why email is so potentially dangerous. And you know, really what I've advised is that you almost need to expect that any email that you send is going to be seen by the world. I mean, in this day and age, it's hard to assume that you have an expectation of privacy about any email you send, and especially with the Public Records Act, your commission is subject to the Public Records Act Public Records Act. If a member of the public requests an email communication that you send about the commission's business, that in all likelihood would be a public record, or you should assume it would be. And so you should assume that every member of the public could see that. So again, this is kind of getting into the Public Records Act, but I would just caution you on that. And I'm sure you've heard that before, but it's good to always remind yourself of that. And this you know, the assumption that your communications are public records if they're about commission business. Same goes for emails or text messages that are sent on your personal devices. The California Supreme Court fairly recently ruled that to be the case. It basically, the communication does not have to be on a government issued email system or device. The only thing that really matters is whether it's about the public's business. If it is, then in all likelihood, it would be a public record. So please keep that in mind. Next slide, please. Okay, so now getting into the kind of technical rules of the Brown Act, and I know that Jackie and her staff do a great job at complying with these, and I'm sure you've heard them all, but just to kind of remind everyone, agendas are to be for regular meetings must be posted 72 hours before the meeting. And that's basically to give the public the opportunity to review the agenda to see if there is an item on the agenda that they want to participate in. The agenda must include the time and location of the meeting, a brief general description of each item to be discussed, and posted in a publicly accessible place. So again, these rules are designed to foster transparency and to give the public the best possible opportunity to participate in public meetings if they so choose. Next slide, please. And so the public, and again, your commission does a great job about this. There was a public comment earlier. Your agendas have a regular standing item for public comment at regular meetings. That's required under the Brown Act. And another thing to keep in mind is that the public should be given the opportunity to comment on each item before your commission takes action. And so always keep that in mind to ask for public comments before you go to a vote on items. Okay, next slide, please. And I'm not sure if I'll go down all these, but so the public obviously has a right to comment. Members of the public can speak on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction. And kind of the whole point is well, not the whole point, but I mean, it's typical to get criticism or negative feedback. A lot of times and I'm sure you've all seen this, members of the public who feel the most strongly about issues are a lot of times they're negative thoughts. So that's just part of the process. And so the public should absolutely be allowed to criticize policies and procedures and programs of the body, and that's just part of the process. The public cannot be required to fill out speaker cards or put down their name and address. That can be requested, but it's not a requirement in order to allow people to speak. Time limits are fine, and it sounds like, or I witness your commission having time limits. That's fine as long as they're reasonable. And disruptive conduct that does not have to be tolerated. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but disruptive conduct would be conduct that basically prevents your commission from having an orderly meeting. So it shouldn't really be about the content of someone's comments, however nasty. It should be more. And I know it's probably kind of harder to disrupt meetings with remote meetings because someone could just be cut off. But back when we had live meetings and they could be live again, disruptive conduct would be if someone's shouting and they won't stop shouting, and then you'd have to clear the room and take a recess. That's the best example I can think of as a disruption that absolutely should not would not need to be tolerated. And the thinking there is it's a public's business, and if one person is disrupting the meeting, they're preventing the meeting from going forward and robbing the public of their public process. Recording, and again, this is kind of back when meetings were live. I've been at a lot of public meetings where members of the public would put recording devices down to audio record a meeting that is permitted. Even video recording. I mean, the only consideration there would be if the video equipment was obtrusive and you had to keep it out of an aisle or something, but the general rule is that the public can record meetings. It's a public setting. And again, I see that the commission is really good about this. The last bullet point, if the body reviews documents, copies of those documents must be publicly available or provided without delay. And so the commission's really good, and most other county boards and agencies and commissions are good for posting the documents on a website and along with the agenda. That's absolutely the best practice. Keep in mind, if a document is kind of brought to the meeting within 72 hours of the meeting occurring, keep in mind that should be posted on the website, or if it's a live meeting, copies of that should be brought to the meeting so they can be distributed to the public. Again, so everyone's privy to the same materials that your board has reviewed and is considering and making its decisions. Next slide, please. So in general, and subject to certain exceptions, the commission can only discuss and take action on items that are on the publicly noticed agenda. And again, that's to foster transparency and public participation before your commission does act. Next slide, please. And again, I know you're all experienced public officials. There are some exceptions to the no action rule, or if, and this usually happens during public comments. If a member of the public does raise an issue, it's fine to provide a brief response or provide information in response to a question, as long as it doesn't kind of devolve into a debate or discussion over the subject of the question. And I've seen this handled most frequently by a member of a board or commission, asking staff. I think that's the best practice, asking staff to get back to the person making the comment that has a question. So that way the public's need can be met, whether it be information or something else, but you don't get sidetracked into a discussion. So I think that's probably the best practice there. Let's see, brief announcements or reports are fine. Like I said, provide reference or information to staff or the public. And this is really common. Ask staff to report back at a future meeting on any matter, or ask that an item be added to future agendas for substantive discussion. All of those are fine. They're not considered Brown Act actions that cannot occur, without something being agendized. That's all fine. And I'm sure this is all just a refresher for you. Next slide, please. Let's see, meeting locations. Obviously right now we're remote, but when meetings are live, they must be held within the jurisdiction of the body. And so for your commission, that's easy, just within Ventura County. And obviously meetings should not begin before the publicly noticed meeting time. It's kind of common sense there. Next slide, please. Oh, wow, that was that. So hopefully you found that helpful. I'd be happy to answer any questions now, or and just know that County Council is always available to advise on any Brown Act issues that come up going forward. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Look, I do have one question from I'm sorry, Commissioner Sanchez. I can't see your last name. Palacio, is that it?
Sanchez Palacios, yes, thank you.
Of course.
I just had a quick question, and I'm sorry if I did miss this, in regards to the sort of like the trail email communications. Does that also apply? Because I've heard different opinions about social media, and if something is posted on social media, and then perhaps there's back and forth among different individuals that belong to the same body of board or committee, can that also be taken as violation of the Brown Act?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can. And I need to update the presentation. That absolutely can be, because again, it's deliberations. Well, if it is deliberation or communication about an item within the subject matter jurisdiction, and the trail, like you said, amounts to a majority of that legislative body, then that's a Brown Act meeting and it's a violation. So absolutely, we need to be super careful about social media as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zaragoza has his hand up.
Jeff, thank you so much for that presentation on the Brown Act. I know that traditionally, we think we know all the rules and regs, but it does not hurt to kind of reiterate the Brown Act conditions. The question I had was on Facebook, and I think Jeanette mentioned, Commissioner Sanchez mentioned that Facebook comments. We need to be real careful on what we say on Facebook regarding any agenda item and so forth, and potentially that could be also a violation. Is that correct, Jeff?
That is correct, and I guess the best advice there is to refrain from expressing a position or deliberating over any social media platform, because you have to assume that a majority of your commission is going to see it, and so that's the best advice there. Just I would recommend not doing that.
No likes, no emojis.
No emojis either. Exactly.
And also responding to a negative comment of your, whatever you discussed or voted on, potentially. No. Is that correct, Jeff?
That's correct. It would really depend, but you just have to be really careful there about substantively engaging anyone in that setting where the same, social media site, or even if it's just an email, could be sent to the other commissioners. And so the best practice there would be if the commenter has incorrect information, maybe ask staff to respond to them to try to educate them, as opposed to a commissioner engaging them.
And by the way, again, thank you for an excellent presentation. Thank you, Jeff.
Of course, yeah, great to see you.
Thank you.
Diane McCall, Commissioner McCall, and then Commissioner Lama.
I just wanted to jump in and say that the city of Fillmore actually came up with a formal social media ordinance that we all agreed upon. Just because of this, it's very easy to jump in on community conversations that occur on social media, and for numerous council members to either join in, like, emoji, whatever we do, and then that becomes a serial meeting. So I would recommend that you speak to your city attorneys about that. It's something we did probably 2 months ago. And it was actually really helpful to bring that out to the community as well, because, a lot of people try to have their conversations and then tag you in things, and they start tagging multiple council members in it for comment, and then that creates problems. So I would just encourage you to think about doing the same. Like I say, it was very helpful for us. So,
Commissioner Gama. Yeah, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I'm interested in information sharing, because I know sometimes we kind of pull back from sharing information because of Brown Act concerns. And I think that's one of the hindrances of the Brown Act, is that information doesn't get shared equally throughout. And then when we finally get to a public meeting and are able to speak about something, then some of us may not be privy to the information out there. So do you have any guidance for good information sharing that doesn't get close to that line of a Brown Act violation? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. As I mentioned during the presentation, my advice there would be there's nothing wrong, like I think you understand with sharing information. The best advice there is to have the information be transmitted by staff, as opposed to having commissioners directly share information with each other. The risk in directly sharing information with each other is that an email with an article or a study could be taken as an invitation, or someone might feel so strongly about it they'll just go ahead and reply, oh yeah, great study, here's how I think we should address this issue in Ventura County. Then that gets forwarded to a majority. There's a Brown Act meeting, and so that's the risk, and that's why it's best to route that through staff. There's no legal issue with staff disseminating that information to the other commissioners, again, as long as there's no reply all and deliberation. And then this is the second caveat: as long as that same information is made available to the public, when ideally at the next at the next meeting, either posting it with the agenda or just making it available. And obviously, if the information shared, it can't necessarily be shared with the public at the exact same time. But as long as it is provided to the public in the context of the next meeting, or especially if the item is going to be deliberated on by your commission, then that would be fine. But again, like I keep saying, and sorry if I'm going into the repeating too much, but it's just the information sharing between commissioners directly is what I would recommend against.
Commissioner McCall, you still have your hand up. I don't know if you have another question. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
I have a couple of questions. For example, we have a chat going, and I was reminded of an event today. It just came to me, but it's not on the agenda, but it's in the chat. And I know in other boards we don't do chat because of a potential Brown Act. Because if you send it to one person, only that person could see it. So I have a couple of questions, but that's one, the chat feature.
Yeah. You know what? I think the best practice is not to have a chat. And I'm not sure how long chats are retained. So it's a Brown Act issue. If there's kind of discussion, it's kind of offline, right? Because if I'm watching the meeting, and especially if I'm not tech savvy, it's like I don't know how to get into that chat. And so that's one potential.
Pretty easy, Jeff.
I know, right? But I mean, it's almost like the public can't be expected to be monitoring the chat and watching the video. And it's almost like if you have a chat, you should tell people, oh, well, anyways, I think it's easier not to have the chat. And then the second issue is, I don't know how long chats are retained, but it could be a Public Records Act issue. And I've had to deal with that in litigation. Actually, both claims have been made that it's violates a Brown Act, and we want you to give us those chats from this meeting, and so then it becomes kind of like an administrative burden, and so it's easier just to disable that, honestly, and so that would be, in my mind, the best practice there.
Well, a couple things. One is you can save a chat. There's 3 little dots next to it where you can save it. I don't know if it would save all the direct messages, but the other thing, for example, it's very helpful today because we have a commissioner who can't get in, and I responded to her and said, if you have a question, I'll ask it for you. I guess she could, that's Commissioner Francina, who is, I think, trying to watch on YouTube, but that could be where the chat, I've seen where the chat just goes to the host or the director. But anyways, it does get to be an administrative burden. But I wanted to say decorum is an issue, not here generally, but I know at Board of Supervisors, it's been an issue. And the Board of Supervisors for San Diego, and I'll send it to you, are adopting an ordinance about people coming up and saying horrible things to the commissioner, to the board members, and to the members of the public, just in public. They're not on Zoom. On Zoom, you could theoretically cut it off. And I know I have this issue at Oxnard City Council some time ago where people would come up and say homophobic or racist things, and I would jump in and try to cut them off. So those kinds of things are not allowed. We don't have to allow racist, homophobic comments or slanders, do we?
I don't want to give a blanket answer because I think it would depend on the facts. And I've heard some of those videos too, and it's terrible. We just have to be careful there, and that's something that's on my office's radar. And so we are going to be looking into having drafting up rules of decorum to address that as best we can. It's just kind of complicated. And just to give one example, I was involved in a case that went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I was in back when I lived in Santa Cruz, and I was working with the city attorney's office. A common commenter at the city council meetings did a Nazi salute, a Heil Hitler salute. There's a few, I mean, that's just offensive in general, but there were a few Jewish members of the council. When that happened, they ejected him from the meeting. And then he sued the city, claiming we violated his First Amendment rights. And it made it all the way to the Ninth Circuit. And so it wasn't a given that he did disrupt the meeting. And so the issue there became, and this is what the court looked at, and I'm just saying this to show how complicated it can be. The issue was, and his argument was, well, my Heil Hitler salute, maybe it was offensive to some, but what actually disrupted the meeting, because that's a test in general, does the behavior disrupt the meeting? And so the guy's argument was, well, my Nazi salute didn't disrupt the meeting. It was the council overreacting. If you had just let me dim my salute and sit down, sure, you could have been offended, but that would have been that. So I just say that, and so that went all the way to the Ninth Circuit. We had to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars litigating it. We ultimately won because there's other behavior that was even more disruptive than that. So it's kind of a continuing thing. But my point in saying all of that is that the facts would really matter. That is on our radar, but you just have to, you can't really have a necessarily blanket rule.
I would just add that shouldn't just offend Jewish members of any group. That should offend all of us.
Of course, yeah, right.
Yeah, I know you meant that. Any other questions from commissioners or Director Rose? You're muted, Director Rose.
There we go. I just want to thank you, Jeffrey, so much for coming in and doing this presentation. It's extremely helpful. And I will let the commissioners know that one of the things in your packet is a review and some draft changes to the bylaws. And they're really an outgrowth of conversation that I had with Jeff regarding this. So we'll go over those in just a couple minutes. But again, thank you so much for coming and doing this presentation. Really helpful.
I would just like to say that I think we have a really excellent county council office. I've seen their work during my time at city council. May have not always agreed with every opinion, as you may know, but really excellent professional staff, and I really appreciate their help to our county. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Okay, terrific. We're on now to, I don't know, we didn't have any public comment on that, did we?
We do not.
Okay, terrific. Now we're going to go to item B, approve revisions to the commission bylaws.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you. And yes, that is item B, but I am going to ask the indulgence of this fine body. If we can just reorder a little bit under the business items, we will do the bylaws next. But CEO Mike Paris has joined us for this meeting.
Yes, I saw him. And I wonder, are you checking up on us?
He is. He's checking. And Mike
I just wanted to join the fun.
He wanted to just say a couple of things regarding item E, which is about the new animal shelter, animal services shelter. So if we can move item E to this point for Mike, and then
yes, thank you. He's got other things to do. So this.
Thank you so much, Chair Ramirez, commission members, council members, Jackie, Donna, animal services team, and volunteers. So thank you for the time this morning. I just wanted to update you and talk some about the shelter, the need for a new shelter. And I know that's been a priority for Chair Ramirez and many of you. And so just wanted to give you a little sense of where we're at and answer some questions, and let you know too, I'm joined today by Scott Powers from our office, Chief Deputy CEO, who really oversees most of our projects relating to construction and land and so forth. So, and Scott's been working on this for many years. So just to give you a sense too, so Jackie asked to meet with us a couple of weeks ago because of some needs for some improvements at the shelter. It's an aging shelter. I think we know it, right? And so that prompted further discussion of where we're at. And so just a couple of things is one is the need. And this is Ventura County and our city partners operate one of the only open door high live release rates shelters in the state. And it's a wonderful thing to do that. And the staff and the volunteers do an amazing job. But I think any of us would agree, looking at the shelter, it's not the level we would want it for our animals. And so we had started several years ago, actually, down the road of just looking at designing what would a new shelter look like and so forth. And we have those designs. They're a little outdated now. And then when the pandemic hit, it just sort of knocked all that to the side. But as we're emerging from the fog of the pandemic and looking forward, we thought it's a good time to sort of reset. And one of the things that we were doing during this time was looking for a location. And previous airport administration had really wanted to keep the adjacent property, and there's vacant adjacent property available for hangar projects and so forth. So our team and Animal Services looked around, looked at business park at the airport, other locations, really looked all over the place and pretty much wound up right back where we are. As so happens when you do a search like that, and you start where we are has a lot of advantages to it. It's not perfect, but it has a lot of advantages to it. And it would also help with moving things forward from a time standpoint and a cost standpoint. So I reached out to our new airport director, Keith Freitas, and had a discussion with him. And I have to say he was totally on board. He gets it. We have to be, really intentional about how we treat our animals, and they're a priority. And so he is fully on board with being flexible about using some of that adjacent property for the shelter, for an expanded and new shelter. And he did say, I just talked to him this morning, that it is designated as something to like an airport layout plan by the FAA, but there's a process for redesignating it. And, it's like 6 months to a year, and he will, start down that road if it looks like that's where we want to go. And I think it is. And he thinks it's, we have a good chance of getting it redesignated because there's other land available for hangars and because there's a road separating the airport and this property. So I think he believes it has a lot to recommend it. So that was very positive news. I think that's something that could really expedite things and move things forward. I wanted to just let you know too, the rough cost estimate that we were looking at, and we're painting with really broad strokes here too, was in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 million for a new facility. Certainly significant, but just needed and realistic. We want to be realistic about the costs. And that is something that we could. So let's talk about possible funding. One is we could finance it, and I think that would make sense. The county, as you know, has AAA long-term credit ratings, and so we would get very favorable financing terms, 30 years plus, and so that would help. But also to look to possible state and federal funding. One of the things that Scott and team is exploring is looking at maybe some of our ARP funding. Is that something that could be used? So there's opportunities out there, and so we just want to start really focusing on moving forward with this because, as I said, it's not in the condition that I think any of us would want it to be. And so a couple other things in terms of the cost and also maybe some state funding as well. So as I said, I think that the location is really is a positive for us. And the other thing that Jackie and I and our team talked about is, if there's things in the meantime, because this is, probably 4 years out to the, in the best case, to open a brand new shelter. So there's going to need to be repairs to the facility to keep it up to, as good a condition as possible. And so, she's going to move forward with that. We told her whatever you need, just go forward and do that. We need to get that done. But at the same time, sort of parallel paths. Let's keep it in good enough shape, but let's also plan and invest for the long term. So I just wanted to take a minute and update you on that, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the question I want to ask Mike is that potentially, I was there when we were talking about the $25 to $30 million to move the shelter. My question is, if we do not move it, and we have the FAA approval to stay there, will the funding still be that high? 30 million.
It's early yet. I think it's a safe number to include, just because construction costs are high and probably not going down. But you know what, let me ask Scott, if, how much of that was related to land, and if we stay there, maybe that, there's certainly rent to be paid, but not acquisition cost for land. And let me see if Scott has a thought on that.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Commission, Chair Ramirez and Commissioners and Mr. Powers, Scott Powers, County Executive Office. Yeah, so in terms of the FAA and the requirements regarding the FAA and the funding that's available in terms of opportunities we're looking at, which Mike mentioned. He mentioned state funding. The state budget on an annual basis, sometimes there's call to projects and maybe we can get some funding for design there. Another opportunity is through the infrastructure bill that was just recently passed, which we're looking forward to pursuing. And in addition, with regards to that, the ARPA funding as well. So those funding sources are solid regardless of the FAA limitations or if there are any.
And Scott,
I'll answer the question.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mayor Zaragoza.
do we, and I think at one time we were thinking of raising the existing buildings and reconstructing everything. Is that still, if I remember a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Mayor Zaragoza, it's been a while. Nice to see you. So the idea would be a phase project where we would look at what buildings we can keep and what buildings we need to raise. And to your point, there are several buildings there that just are tear downs. That includes the kennels, of course, and we need to rebuild. So the idea is to add on a couple of acres to the east of the shelter and phase it in, construct there, and then rebuild the existing 4.5 acres that exist.
So the funding is going to be required then. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Thank you.
One of the questions that Mayor Zaragoza had, Scott, was in the 25 to 30 million, was much of that related to land acquisition? You know what I mean? If we don't have to move, we can build where we are and expand a bit.
Thank you for that.
Cost?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Mike. In that number, yes, that included land acquisition. So we're looking at a couple $1 million, for acreage, and depends on where the acreage was. And so that wouldn't be part of a new constructing on site, of course, as we already have the land. There is a land lease that would be paid on an annual basis, which we pay now, which would continue in perpetuity. But that's that would go to the airports. But so there is opportunity there as well in terms of hopefully reducing these project costs without the land acquisition aspect.
Thank you. Okay.
Other questions from commissioners?
I had a quick one. Is it possible to use American Rescue funds for any portion of the animal shelter?
Yes, absolutely, and that's what Mr. RCO mentioned as well. And it's a unique opportunity with the ARPA funds in terms of infrastructure and its provisions for infrastructure. And actually, there's a bill out right now that's a bipartisan bill that gives us more flexibility with those funds. And so what we're thinking in concept is approaching the cities for their share, and maybe we dive into ours for design on our side, and maybe construction side, we work with the cities and their portion of funding, and maybe we can call it crowdsourcing of sorts for the ARPA funds. That's an idea that's being bandied about in terms of us working with our consultant and making sure that it's an audit compliant action as well.
I would just like to chime in. I think there are some opportunities for public-private partnership, and I believe there's potential foundation money that could be used to help. I see Commissioner McCall has her hand up.
I would just want to request that, as this moves forward, you had just mentioned cities paying their portion of this project. We're really going to need some, forewarning. It needs to be something that's, a couple years out if we can. I mean, we really need to be able to plan for this. This could really hurt. As you know, the cities are probably not in as good a shape as the county is at this point.
Correct.
So that could really put us in a real bind. So I hadn't thought of that aspect before until Mr. Powers said that. So I would just want to please request that.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Absolutely. So, up until the pandemic, we had been meeting, as we meet monthly with the city managers and keeping them posted on this. And so that is something that we'll continue to do. And that's one of the reasons we're bringing it up now, so we can plan for the future. And we absolutely understand the impact on cities and appreciate that. And I appreciate your city and all of them. I think we've reached a really good place. with our funding agreements with the cities. And it's stable and predictable, and we want to preserve that to the extent possible. And that's one of the reasons why I think financing it with really good rates is helpful, and then possibly using ARP funds or any other state funds. And we're going to focus on that. And I think it would be great to have county and all these cities collectively, seeking these funds together. So that'll be our primary goal, to find other sources of funds to fund this project. Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Well, no, if not, Mr. Powers, thank you for being here. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you, Chair Ramirez. A pleasure.
Powers.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Talk to you later.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Then we'll go back to bylaws.
Yes, all right. Well, I hope that everyone enjoyed that little reset for this, but I'm going to jump back into the bylaws, which really, as I said, was a bit of an outgrowth of conversation with Jeffrey Barnes regarding some of the Brown Act concerns. So I had an opportunity to look at the bylaws and realize that there were a few areas, and I had sent this over to you with a memorandum, so I won't take too much time walking through this, but there were a few items that I thought would be beneficial for us to revise and update. And I'm just going to run through this quickly. The first was Article 2, and that was to change to revise the term from policy and replace it with executive. This body has never really functioned in a policy making. It's not an operational decision making body. It's an executive level committee with input and advice to the director and to the organization. So I thought that would just be a little bit more reflective of the nature of this committee. The second was Article 11. That was just to clarify that we're talking about the recording secretary, because that wasn't consistent throughout the document. The third was to really set some guidelines from a practice standpoint regarding how to place items on agenda. The question had come up several times. We didn't have a protocol, and it was Jeff Barnes' recommendation that we put it into the bylaws. So the first rewrite part under Article 12 is the same that we've always had, that we would send it to the chair 7 days prior, and then it would be posted 72 hours prior to the meeting. That remains consistent. Really, the newest information is providing the opportunity for any of you as members of this commission to submit information to us to be placed on the agenda. Again, for a timing perspective, we're saying 10 days prior to the scheduled meeting. That would be sent to the recording secretary. That would be included onto the agenda, and then the chair would have final approval whether to include that or not. Article 13 is really just cleaning up the order of the rules of order for the meeting. And then Article 14 was really, again, what Jeffrey Barnes just discussed, was about the dissemination of information. There's been a question, well, if I want to send something to commissioners, how do I do that? And so this would now place into the bylaws that any information that was going to be shared would be sent directly to our recording secretary, and we would send that out to everyone so that everyone has the opportunity to see the same information. And then the last is reviewing the bylaws, and I see that there's an actual typo on here where it says Article 15. It says bylaws shall be reviewed no less than every 2 years. I'm proposing that those are 5 years. We actually missed 2 years. We should have reviewed, I believe it was February of this year. Everything with COVID kind of got us all off a little on our schedule. But it seems to me, this is my just recommendation to this body, that it be a 5-year review. We can always review more frequently if something was to come up that we wanted to add to, but just as an automatic renewal process, I would propose that there be a 5-year opportunity. I think every 2 years is it's a little burdensome for this group to have to do that every 2 years. So those are the proposed changes to the bylaws that I am offering. Happy to discuss any of these, and would like to see if we can move for approval of these. So we can move forward.
Before we start, would you just, usually when in other groups like nonprofits, you have to propose them and then wait 30 days or wait a period of time. We don't have to do that. We could.
I don't believe so. When I asked Jeff Barnes about that, I did not hear, but we surely could do that also. I mean, there isn't anything to preclude us from doing that. We could review this time and then have final approval at the next meeting. We could do that in February if that would be more comfortable.
What's the pleasure of the commissioners?
Madam Chair, I agree. I think it's best that we do the 30 days. You know, that way, you know, at least the public has the opportunity to weigh in on this.
Okay, that's a recommendation. Other commissioners?
I don't personally see anything that's concerning. I mean, even possibly as the public, most of these feel like they're more housekeeping items than anything else. So I'll go with what everybody else decides, but I don't feel the need to push it out 30 days if legally we don't need to do that. But again, I'll leave it to the majority.
My concern is that it's not an item that has to be done immediately. So, but that was only my concern. You know, but I will, whatever the board commission likes, I will follow that too.
Other commissioners, Ms. Santangelo?
Jackie, would there be any repercussions for you if this was put off?
No, I think it would be fine if we wanted to go have this discussion here and bring it back. I mean, since we meet quarterly, I don't think 30 days works for us, but we could bring it back in February. That would be fine because we're not changing any timelines. And the next item on our agenda actually is to talk about the meeting dates, which would continue to be just as they are. So I think it would be fine to do that.
I have a question about the meeting, just slightly different. We are under the remote rules of AB 361 today. In February, who knows where we'll be, but would we need a special meeting to continue to meet remotely?
No, actually, Chair Ramirez, I have that as item D.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Talk about, that's fine, that we have a resolution that we've been able to craft to adjust for our 90 days. So we will be fine with that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry for that. I did that well. All right. So what's the consensus here about, I hear caution from a couple of commissioners. I see Commissioner McCall says, let's do it. I tend to err, actually, I'm pretty conservative about this, surprise. Like to just acknowledge that there might be something there and then nobody can say, oh, you moved too quickly. So will someone make a motion?
So move.
All right. Commissioner Gama, do you have a question?
I'd just like to say that in the motion, perhaps we could say that we're taking this 30 days to give the public the time to take a look and give feedback if warranted on these bylaws, because I think that's important.
Are you okay with that, Commissioner Zaragoza?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what my concern would be. Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Any other any other discussion? Okay, so
I'll second it.
okay, yes, all right, terrific. So let's have a roll call. And the motion is that we adopt this 30 days hence for the purpose of public comment, public information.
Thank you.
Roll call, please. Who's going to do roll call? So Puppy, who's chiming in.
I'm sorry, we do have an emergency. Hang on one moment. Let me just get some of that.
Yeah, Chair Ramirez, yeah, there is some emergency here on site.
Say that again, Randy.
There is an emergency here on site.
Should we take a pause?
I suggest we keep going. We will take care of this.
Okay.
We don't have that much more to go.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry, did we get to
I asked for a roll call.
okay.
So can you do that?
I can do that, absolutely. Just bear with me one moment. Get Chairman Ramirez, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Yes. I'm going through my boxes. Commissioner Santangelo.
Yes.
Okay. Looking at my boxes, Commissioner Zaragoza.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner McCall.
I'm a yes.
Wonderful. Commissioner Gama?
Yes.
Great. And Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
All right. Did I miss anyone?
Enegren, Chris Enegren?
Yes, I did. Commissioner Enegren.
Yes.
All right. So let me make sure I understand what we're doing here. We will bring this back at our next meeting in February. I know they had asked for 30 days, but since we don't meet, we'll bring it back then. I will resend this to you with that change that I saw as a typo in Article 15, and we will move this forward in February. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, on to the next item.
All right.
Meeting dates.
Yes, the next item you have in your packet are the proposed dates for the upcoming year for calendar year 2022. You can see that those dates, and we also have on that same document the city staff meeting dates so that everyone can see. We usually meet 2 weeks prior to our commission meeting with city staff to see if there are any items that you would like to bring forward for us. So we would need a motion and approval for those dates.
Commissioner Santangelo, I see your hand up.
That was old. Sorry, I'll lower it.
Okay, any discussion, comments about the meeting dates? So can I have a motion by
I'll
someone?
move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm taking this. Commissioner McCall, you moved that?
Yes.
Okay, and Commissioner Kavanaugh, you seconded?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, and a roll call for this. Commissioner Ramirez,
Yes.
Commissioner Zaragoza.
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Gama.
Yes.
All right. Commissioner McCall,
Yes.
Commissioner Enegren,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Commissioner Santangelo.
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much for that.
I'll go today. Yes.
And I think that now takes care of the business items since we had moved. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We have the assembly item bill to talk about.
AB 361, yes.
Yes. So as you all are aware, the Assembly Bill 361 has been presented really an opportunity to make sure that we have a process to ensure that under the Brown Act, because we are meeting remotely, that there is still a need to do that. And it does have a 30-day requirement. So we have a resolution that we will hopefully today adopt and sign. However, I was able to talk to our county council since the general resolution for the state is every 30 days. But that's burdensome for us since we only meet every 90 days. So the attached resolution that you have in your packet, which we would ask for us to adopt today, will allow us to piggyback, for lack of a better word, on the Board of Supervisors 30-day resolution until we get to our next meeting. So we would do this again in February. If there is still a need, we would again review whether there are standing orders, public health orders, and if there's a need for us to continue meeting virtually. But this will allow us to do it every 90 days as opposed to every 30 days, which I'm sure most of you are familiar doing in your own cities. So I am presenting this resolution for review and approval today, and then we'll bring this back again in 90 days. But that gives us the ability to move this forward for 90 days.
Commissioner comments? Discussion? Commissioner Zaragoza,
Move approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
is there a second from Commissioner Gama? Can we have the roll call?
All right, thank you. Sandra, are you on? She is not. Okay, she is attending to the other issue, so I will keep going. Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Gama? Commissioner McCall?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Commissioner Enegren?
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Santangelo?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Zaragoza?
Yes.
And did I miss anyone again? 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope, we've got everyone. Wonderful. Okay, that takes care of all of the business. I am going to ask your indulgence. We do have a bit of a situation occurring on our facility at this moment that really does need my attention. You have the director's report. There really is nothing else here to report, except I will unfortunately acknowledge that the managing veterinarian that we had hired has since, she had accepted and now she has rescinded her acceptance. So we are looking for that position again, but we will get that taken care of as quickly as we can. But I ask that I just submit this director's report for your review, and happy to discuss at a later date if any of you have any questions.
Thank you. So is there a problem with dispensing with the rest of the agenda? Anyone have a problem with that so that the staff can attend to the needs there? All right, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, but I want to just first thank everybody for being here, especially our animal services staff from the different cities. I want to thank Ms. Santangelo for having your kitty make an appearance. And is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Thank you. I don't think we need a roll call, do we?
Great.
I think not. Thank you all. Good luck with the situation. I'll be in touch
Thank
later.
you all very much. I appreciate your time and your patience as we deal through this.
Thank you.
Everybody